second round of UDC 2021. My name is Upi. I'll be your chair for this round. Preferred gender pronouns for me are he or they. May I please ask the fellow panel to introduce themselves to the room in the order that they appear in TAPI.
Hey folks, my name is Chinmay Mohan. No preferred gender pronouns. Yeah, just looking forward to a good debate. Peace.
Hi, my name is Otem.
Hi everyone, I'm Ariella. She, her. Thank you.
The final note for the judges is that just like to remind debaters to please address us as a collective. So panel or members of the House would be fantastic. All right. If teams could kindly do the same for us, that'd be wonderful. So opening government.
Yeah, Adela speaking first. I prefer she.
And the last speaking second, he please. I consent to being streamed.
And yeah, I also consent.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Opening opposition.
Andrew speaking first, he or they, I consent to streaming.
Baron speaking second, he or they, I also consent. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Let me just write that. Sorry, I think I just dropped for a moment over there. So closing off, if you don't mind saying that one more time. So sorry.
Sorry, I might have missed it. So Artem speaking first, Roman second, he, they for both.
Thank you. And closing opposition.
Vicky speaking first, share this fine, and I'm okay with streaming.
Trina speaking second, share day please. Recording, streaming fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all speakers, for those introductions, as well as the consent indications. And let's heed all of them in this debate. Just three really quick notes before we start. Number one is for speakers, you're encouraged to use your own timer. I'll supplement that with 1, 6, and 7 as usual in the chat. For POIs, feel free to default to chat. If any speaker prefers other methods that they're more comfortable with, either video or audio, feel free to say that before you start your speech, and everybody else will heed whatever it is that you prefer. On my side, I'll be turning off my video, so please don't be startled during the duration of the speech. If you want to turn on your video, that's completely fine. If there's any issues with tech, just let me know. We'll sort it out accordingly and vibe it out as we go. But fingers crossed that nothing bad's going to happen. All right, are there any questions before we start the round? Cool. In that case, wishing everybody the best of luck for this round. May this be a fantastic one. Under the motion that reads, this House, as a university scholarship fund targeted at marginalized identity groups, would prioritize allocating funds based on merit rather than economic necessity. Opening the debate, Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
Thank you. So, panel, despite the fact that currently a lot of marginalized students have much better academic performances and other extracurricular activities that make them very successful, they're still marginalized from getting scholarships. Also, they face constant external pressure that makes them economically necessary also, and also needing of the scholarship. That's why in the status quo, this kind of people, marginalized students, despite the fact that they have good academic performances, they still face these hardships. I'm going to be talking about two things in the speech. First, I'm going to talk how is this going to be much more effective compared to the alternative route when we prefer economic merit, scholarship based on economic necessity. And secondly, how we're going to we'll be able to attract as a fund more investment on our side of the house. Before that, some clarifications. By fund, we mean it's more likely to be independent fund who is targeted and interested in supporting and funding marginalized groups. That is to say, it might be gender minorities, women, it can be racial minorities, Black and Hispanic groups, and it also might be sexual minorities. So by merit, we mean that just we are going to look at academic qualifications and other extracurricular stuff that this kind of students did. Alternatively, economic necessity means just we're going to distribute money to those who need the most financially. So the first thing is why it's going to be much more effective. Note that alternatively, students based on who will be giving money based on economic necessity are much more likely to drop out. Why is this the case? First reason is that because they're not based on merit, that is say because of the fact that if currently we're not giving them money based on their merits, that means that they don't have the merit, that is say they don't have a good academic qualifications and extracurricular activities by the virtue of the fact that they don't have prior skills and experiences in studying that they're best that they have. This is the first reason, because the lack of experience and lack of skills, primarily, for example, in the high school, they were disadvantaged and didn't get enough knowledge. They're less likely to succeed in the university studies. Second reason is why they're more likely to fail and drop out of the college is because funding is just not enough for them just to sustain them, right? Because they still might have other expenses because of from this privileged community. They still have to work and they still have to take care of their family. For this reason, just the funding is probably not going to be enough and cover all of their expenses, which means they have to additionally work, which means that they will still be facing a lot of hardship that might be affecting how they will be successful in the university. For this reason, the kind of students that will be based on economic necessity are much more likely to drop out from the university. Comparatively, when you recruit students who you take because of the merit are more likely to finish their studies for the same reason that I outlined above, because they are much more capable because of their prior experiences and skills, which means that they are going to be much more successful in finishing the degree because of the fund that you have provided. Which means that by successfully finishing the college degree, they're more likely to be working in a cool company when they graduate. Which means that they can do a lot of things that are beneficial for the communities. So they can get into a network of a lot of high-skilled, high-level officials, and then talk about and propagate this kind of issues. And just by talking to by just promoting social movements, being more active in the kind of charities, like donating in the charities that are directed into marginalized students' success in academy, or just the kind of just for the purpose of helping out marginalized students. They can change the work, try to change the work culture within the company that they are working, right? Because of the fact that they are from the marginalized group, they have themselves experienced all the hardships that marginalized students face, and they're more likely to engage in this kind of successful campaigns and also propagations that help out marginalized students. Note that all of this is very unlikely to be possible at the point you fund the students who are based on economic necessity. For the same reason that I explained, they're much more likely to drop out, and that's why they can very unlikely at the point they are economically deprived, at the point they will not be working in this high-level authorities, that they will not have enough economic and political capital to propagate the issues for the marginalized students. Why is this important for specifically this company? Is that because of the fact that because of these students will be doing all this kind of good things for their community. This is a good thing because for the company, because oftentimes the students will note that the company that the fund that has that provided them with the scholarship is this kind of fund. This brings me to my second point. It's about the investment. That is, how we're going to get more investment on our side of the house. Not investment, but just donations for this kind of fund. Before I'll go on, I'll take a closing.
Do you think poor students have no capabilities of doing well if funded?
Yeah, I just explained that previously, given that not even if because of their prior experiences and skills that are very irreversible, that doesn't allow them to be successful because they lack previous experiences to be successful academically, and also because funding is not enough to sustain them. That's why they are less likely to be successful and more likely to drop out. On the point of how we're going to get more donations on our side house, because those students who be doing who were successful finish a college degree, they're more likely to engage and go to some popular company and give also interviews and they're telling stories of how this kind of fund funded them and like gave this scholarship, and that's why they'll be naming the name of the fund, which means that they are going to attract companies and other rich people because now you are literally showing, and in the media and in the hyping them to these companies that note the scholarship receivers of the scholarship fund have succeeded and are doing this all kinds of good things. Alternatively, when you fund based on the economic necessity, less successful students will be there will be less number of successful students graduating, and this is important for fund because it affects the ability of the fund to attract investments. If you're continuously funding number of students, but at the end of it, it ends up that nobody actually succeeded and nobody actually were able to somehow be successful and generate a benefit for the marginalized community, you are more likely to get a bad reputation from the companies, which means they're less likely to donate for you. And which means that as a fund, at the point when you attract a lot of this money from these companies and other donators, you are more likely to subsidize more students in the future. That increases your capability and do all of the kinds of things. And also at the future point when you can recruit also students based on economic necessity. For these reasons, because we help out these marginalized students most effectively, and also increase the capacity of this kind of funds to fund students more in the future, I'm very proud to propose.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for those very fine remarks. To begin the case from the opening opposition side of the House, inviting the first speaker from that team to speak. You're here.
Can I check that I'm visible and audible?
Yep, perfect.
Please offer points of information in Zoom chat. I'll do my best to take one from closing government at some point in the speech. I think the government is broadly correct that these university funds have a couple of interests. They want to get more of these students into university. They want to improve their reputation. They want these students to do better so they get more donations, investments going into the future. I think the problem with opening government is they don't really engage with the nature of these students and just basically write off the poorer as being less able. We're going to prove to you why that's wrong with 3 substantives on each of those metrics, on why we do better on each of those grounds with rebuttal integrated. But before that, just a couple of notes on the comparative. OG mentions independent funds. I think it's also realistic within this debate to include funds run by universities themselves, just because this is the reality that many universities have these targeted scholarships in many of these cases. I think also it's reasonable that these funds don't just cover the course fees, but also living costs and other expenses such as textbooks, just because that is the reality that we live in. First substantive then on how we're going to get more students into university and help them more. The first thing I would note here is that there's evidently a trade-off between funding scholarships based on merit and funding scholarships based on economic necessity. These organizations have finite funds at any point in time. People need a certain amount of money to attend in order to cover their expenses of tuition, of living costs, etc. And there's a limited amount that they can get from government loans. There's also diversity in needs within these minority groups where some of them might be economically better off and some of them might not be economically as well off. The world then that we live under government is problematic in terms of the number of students that we're able to admit for 2 reasons. The first is that because simply merit does not always align with economic necessity. So this means then that the rich students that government deems to be more merititious, you are funding more than what they would need in order to be able to attend. So there's money being wasted in that sense. But also when it comes to the poorer students who are deemed to be slightly less merititious by government, they're not being funded as much or enough in order for them to attend in the first place. So there's also a lesser number of poorer students attending in these sorts of places. The significance of this analysis is that there's going to be fewer students attending these universities because your funds aren't distributed as efficiently in order to allow disadvantaged students to have the economic means to attend in the first place. This is significant because this is one of the fundamental goals of these sorts of funds in the first place. In many cases, if they're set up by a university, they're set up to specifically improve these metrics for the university. So they have more women in their courses, so they have more ethnic minority students, and therefore this is something that they're reviewed for, assessed for, and therefore this is very important. But I think this is also true for independent funds that that want to show effectiveness and want the numbers to show that they are effective. And therefore, if like the fact that we are able to get more students into university under our side is important. Secondly, then, in terms of prestige and how we're able to help these students more, I would note a couple of things about the nature of university education. The type of education that you're providing to every student is pretty much the same. You go to the lecturers, go to the lectures, you go to classes, etc. You get the same degrees after which you graduate university. I think what this shows then is that university in this sense acts as a leveler in terms of bringing everyone to basically the same sort of income level when they graduate from university, regardless of how rich or poor the student is. If they're studying law, they get a law degree, they go to your law firm, they get an internship and they start working there and start on fairly similar salaries, given that they've done the same course and earned the same degree and probably have fairly similar skills. The significance of this then is that there's a greater benefit to those people who are starting off from a lower base economically. So those coming from like lower socioeconomic classes with families with lesser income, there is a greater benefit to those individuals because bringing them up to the same level when it comes to income is a greater change in terms of their performance. Why is this significant? I think firstly, I think these funds have some interest in helping minority people, given that they were literally set up in order to do so. In the case of universities, they want to help their students succeed as much as possible in the future. In the case of independent funds, these are like charitable initiatives that people set up out of their own goodwill. I think that demonstrates some interest in helping these students succeed. But also in terms of just like prestige and why this looks better for the universities, I think there's a trend within society today that there's increasing awareness of the nature of the discrimination, disadvantages, and how they are intersectional. So for example, there's increasing awareness that in many cases, even though Harvard might be admitting ethnic minority students, they're still coming from very high economic classes, which is leading to a high degree of scrutiny onto them. There's also just increasing data in the United States, for example, where the federal government collects this of like how much students' incomes are actually improved by their attendance at universities to measure whether they're delivering value or not. I think as this awareness increases, the ability of universities to demonstrate that they have delivered additional value to these students by bringing them up to the same level from a lower starting point is something that will make them look better going into the future. Before I move on, POI from CG.
When we decide whom to support based on merit, we can still change scholarship amount depending on means. So we will not be funding someone from middle class the same amount as someone who is poor.
I think you can play with the wording of the motion, but I think like the comparative here is that even if you take a very soft stance, there is still going to be a trade-off for the reasons that I've analyzed. And like insofar that you prioritize merit you can obviously use merit to decide who you're going to fund, but once you've decided who you're going to fund, we think you should probably do this based on economic necessity for the reasons that we've given you. Finally, then, in terms of why these students are actually still going to achieve very well, or even better in many cases, responding directly to the OG claim about how they're going to drop out. I would note firstly that OG claim about these students dropping out is like primarily based on the idea that they're not going to have funds to pay for textbooks or whatever. I think we're completely fine to fund that. I think that takes out all of their mix on that claim. But two reasons then for why these students who have like greater economic need are actually likely to do better at university. The first is the nature of admissions. I would note that in the United States, where a lot of this like money actually is, and in many parts of the world, admissions are holistic. That means students are assessed on a wide range of things like extracurricular activities, like essays, like subjective features that mean that one assessor's opinion is going to differ to that from the next. Given that there are so many qualified students, that means the student who is more merititious in the government's world is only very marginally so and probably not going to make that much of a difference. But secondly, positively, why we're going to be actively better. I think students coming from like worse social economic backgrounds face greater challenges in their ability to get to the same point, whether it be in test scores, essays, or whatever, because they probably have caring responsibilities at home, because they probably had to have part-time jobs, etc. They faced additional challenges in their high school years and would have had to work harder to succeed and overcome all of those obstacles. I think what that demonstrates then is that these students who might be achieving at the same level, who might be demonstrating the same level of merit, because they have faced more obstacles and overcome them, demonstrate a greater potential to succeed. And so by that we admit those students on the opposition side, they are probably going to do even better economically going into the future because they've been put through those more of those challenges and have a stronger work ethic, which then leads to more donations coming in, more success of the fund at large. I think on all grounds we show you that the fund is more successful on our side. We're very proud to oppose.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Leader of Opposition, for those very kind remarks. To continue the case from opening government, inviting speech from DPM. Hear her.
Okay, just a second. Can you please confirm that you can hear me? Okay. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Two things in the speech. First of all, why when we invest into the more academically and holistically successful individuals, why this is more likely to pay off for that community. But second of all, why if we help these like more remarkable individuals, why we're likely to generate more funds. And at the point when we generate more funds, we can help more vulnerable people. Therefore, we win on their metric as well. So, but before that, just to clarify the goal of these institutions, I guess all has implicitly agreed with that as well. But just to spell it out, I think the goal of these institutions is to produce outcomes that are beneficial for the discriminated communities, because that's the reason they were created in the first place. But I just want to note that they are more nuanced in their understanding of this good outcomes. They are not chasing numbers like how many women you have in STEM in the STEM industry, but they also chase looking for more structural changes, whether they receive the same amount of money, whether they can be whether they have same amount of opportunities to be as successful or reach higher positions in STEM as well. Therefore, to think that we are chasing just numbers is not effective in this debate. What they're looking for is the change overall. They have, I guess, I guess they recognize the main trade-off in this debate. They say at the point when you help more people who are doing academically well, you harm the poor people who can't access that. I have two responses to that. First of all, I just want to flag that there are lots of ways to boost your CV or admission chances that do not involve any kind of material stuff. For example, you can do extracurricular work. You can ask, for example, you can ask for an internship at your local job place, for example, and do lots of other stuff, do volunteering and this kind of stuff. Therefore, it does not necessarily involve any kind of monetary stuff. And the causality link between that, if you are good at having good grades, this doesn't mean that you are automatically rich. But second of all, the characterization of these individuals. Note, these people are still minority members. They still face the discrimination. They still face the oppression that is directed towards their group. This also still affects their economic situation because they're less likely to get jobs. They're less likely to have full families because they're, for example, dads are more likely to be arrested and etc. That means when they grow up in their families, they're more likely to be poor as well. But yes, they can pay for their SAT or GRE in order to apply for a certain university, but they're still at best lower middle class people because of the statistically, if you're a member of that minority, you are more likely to be a poorer person, and that means at the point when they apply to that scholarships, if they are not accepted, they are forced to go to the second tier choices of their own, or not going to the to this kind of universities at all, because they go. Perhaps they'll try to go to the second degree colleges, but still this is a worse, because on our side of the house they can get to the better university and produce better outcomes. And I think the more at the point when they do not receive that kind of scholarships, at the point when they tried so hard in order to have good academic standing, this is frustrating for them because they have invested already. They have to break through lots of structural problems, and that this is more disappointing to them, and they're less likely to continue their studies. And this is bad because you're wasting a person who had the potential to be successful. Now, I just want to add additional mechanization why these people are likely to be successful. At the point when you for example, at studying at a better university, you engage in student clubs, you get friends who are also richer, who you can help, who you can help later on in their life. They can provide a job, provide recommendations, etc. You get access to funding from that universities, going to conferences and do research. You get access to the good professors with whom you can get researchers who already have the names to get published, who can write you a good recommendation letter. As a result of that, you're more likely to get better master's degree. You're more likely to get better job later on in your life, because these privileges accumulate, and therefore they are more likely to do local changes, more likely to succeed on our side of the house. For example, if I get, like, as a Black person, to the good financial company, I can hire a Black student as my intern, and this is good for that community as well. Second thing to say here is regarding the amount of funding that we receive on our side of the house. Note there are more money on our side of the house, because at the point when you have lots of successful students, you can advertise them as success cases, like their achievements are spread at the, like, for example, at the news, when they are given interview, it is mentioned like below that this is the recipient of that scholarship, and etc. and boosts the prestige of that kind of scholarships. And note, this affects your bargaining power as a scholarship fund in order to receive funds. When you ask money from the university administration, you ask from private individuals who are likely to support you, because you can show the result, not just numbers, but as all claims, but the achievements that they have received. I guess it is better to have like one extraordinary Black student rather than having 10 average Black students, because this one Black student can get like do extraordinary stuff and like get more money to that fund and institution. But before I continue, I would like to take CO. Hello, anyone? Okay, please note that there was no engagement, even if I have asked for one. So companies are likely to do this kind of stuff for two reasons. First of all, they want PR. They want to have like to their tag name on the website of that scholarship or when they meet. But second of all, they also want access to the talented individuals whom they can recruit to their companies and whom they can work and generate revenue for them. Like if you get, like, for example, acceptance to the, like, some privileged scholarship, sometimes you're required to do like the dining with that family who sponsors that kind of a scholarship. Therefore, the companies are more likely to do that, more likely to accept that when you have lots of success cases. But secondly, please note, this is a long-term stuff. Like, these scholarship funds exist for the very long time, and you accumulate this privilege over time. Even if you lose out on some vulnerable students in the short run, we are more likely to help more people, like, over the longer periods of time. At the point this scholarship gets like more prestige, more knowing among students, and there are more people applying, more companies trying to enter to that scholarship and support you, and you help more people. And over the long period of time, you get more prestige, and you can help more students overall, rather than you could have helped just like right now. Therefore, on that basis, we win on the metric of the O as well, but we also show to you how we can produce more local changes to that community. Therefore, very proud to propose.
Right, wonderful. Thank you very much, DPM, for those very fine remarks. Finally, to close the opening half, inviting the DLO to speak. Here.
Hi, give me a second. Let me just set up my timer and papers. Okay. All right, starting my speech in 3, 2, oh, sorry, before that, I'll accept POIs through the chat, but if I haven't accepted one by around 5 minutes, 30 seconds, feel free to interrupt me. I would prefer to take a POI from closing Gov. Perfect. Sorry, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. There are two questions I want to answer in this debate. The first, where is the fund more likely to get more investment? The second, where are we likely to get more people, and why is this a particularly important thing in the debate? Responses integrated and substantive. Firstly, where is the fund more likely to get investment? Opening government made 3 claims. The first, that meritorious people now won't have experience in higher education, and if they don't have funding, they can't be sustained. Note that this harm is symmetric. i.e. that people who are poor also now cannot get access to higher education experience, also can now be sustained. But the more contentious thing they say, secondly, is if we choose based on merit, these individuals are more likely to successfully complete their degree because of their pre-existing skills. Firstly, note Andrew's mitigation about how these are individuals that often have to work a lot harder than these individuals that have more absolute achievement because of the backgrounds they come from, and often thus have the pre-existing skills to thrive, but just wasn't given the resources to. But beyond that mitigation, we actually think individuals chosen based on merit are less likely to complete their degree for two structural reasons. One, if you don't have money since you were born, you are far more likely to be desperate. You're far more likely to hold on to that opportunity for dear life and not give it up regardless of anything. I think that desperation is what drives individuals to fight their hardest and try their best. But secondly, in the world of Gov, there's likely to be a merit requirement in order to continue your degree, i.e. at each point in your degree, you need to meet a certain grade, because that's how merit scholarships often work in order to ensure that you are actually meritorious. And this means greater pressure on you. That means you're more likely to drop out. The comparative is an individual who was given the scholarship based on economic necessity, doesn't have to fulfill those same requirements, can take their time getting adjusted as opposed to having to adjust immediately. Note, even if there isn't a merit requirement explicitly, the pressure to live up to expectations because the opportunity was given to you based on merit, not because you needed it, that pressure means you're more likely to drop out, means you're more likely to go through mental stress that makes it far, far worse for you. So in conclusion, we think it is actually more likely that individuals selected based on merit are likely to drop out and all the harms they talk about occur. The third claim they make is that an individual selected on merit is more likely to do good things for their community. And the underlying analysis here is that they do better and thus they can do more good. Firstly, this is responded to by what I said earlier about why users are still likely to have a lot of skills. But secondly, note that we are more likely to do good things for the community in our world, which leads to greater investment, because individuals that are economically disadvantaged are often far more proximate to their community's struggles. That means even if I were to bite the bullet that individuals who are meritorious are more capable, we don't think this is true, they are less likely to support their community. They're more likely to migrate and do things like that. Number one, because through merit, they have the capacity to do that. But two, because they are less likely to be proximate to their community struggles, and their efforts to improve, like climb up the socioeconomic ladder, is less likely to include their community versus individuals that were proximate to those struggles for their entire life. But secondly, we think even if we accept there's like same amount, like the greater absolute achievement for individuals that are meritorious, note that individuals who are economically disadvantaged and marginalized in other ways come from more intersectional communities. This means communities that are often poor and African-American as opposed to just poor, or as opposed to just African-American. This means there's a greater net amount of upliftment within these communities because they are uplifting individuals that are from a lower socioeconomic background than the communities that individuals from merit, that individuals that are selected based on merit would come from. No, that means this greater upliftment means greater increase in reputation for these investment funds and so on, because there's just, like I said, greater upliftment, even if the absolute achievement is less. The second thing I will say is we'll bite the bullet on the final comparative about investment, right? So on the Gov, you like this meritorious individual in absolution achieves better things, but on the Op, there is a greater change in performance because they come from lower backgrounds, even if the absolute achievement isn't much. Why is the change in performance better for investment as compared to absolute achievement? 5 structural reasons. The first, as Andrew tells you, the difference in absolute achievement is very negligible because, like, number one, merit in a lot of areas such as the US is very subjective. Number two, with econ disadvantage, you often have to work a lot harder and thus build the prerequisite skills. Therefore, the difference in absolute achievement is negligible. But 3 other structural reasons, right? 4 other. One, it's easier to build a success story narrative with individuals that come from disadvantaged backgrounds, even if their absolute achievement is less, because it is easier to construct a story, a narrative, and that is what individuals relate to. That is what garners you public support, because that is the type of thing that creates empathy and tugs on individuals' heartstrings. Secondly, you can show their background, you can show the communities they come from. It is far easier to gain public support in that sense. Thirdly, academic achievements are far less relatable than actual real-life circumstances. That is to say, individuals relate to struggles. It is far more easy to understand what it means to not be able to purchase food as opposed to how great a first-class degree is. Number one, because the majority of individuals are just more likely to go through the struggle of food than to have ever, like, than to have achieved a first-class degree. But secondly, because it's just more understandable and more proximate to them, is like when you're working, you kind of forget about your education. You're more able to understand day-to-day struggles. And if you see an individual that has gone through so many day-to-day struggles, you're more likely to give them public support. Fourthly, we just think academic achievements are far less visceral than economic harm, and thus seeing that greater change in performance is more visceral when you can see the communities they come from, and thus that viscerality provokes more action, allows the fund to get more reputation and thus more prestige. Lastly, we just think the circumstances that you come from are far more quantifiable than academic achievement. That means it's far more quantifiable and easy to say, look at this person from this economic background that earns this income that have improved so much, as opposed to first-class degrees, honors, that is far harder to understand. Before anything, I'll take a POI from closing gaffes quickly.
Students who get funded represent the minuscule minority of the community, so the importance of improving their situation is vastly less important than the impact of the outstanding individuals who succeed.
Yeah, my point here is, and that's the conclusion to this analysis, is that a greater change in performance is more likely to gain public support and thus greater investment in three ways. Number one, because the general public are more able to relate, there's greater, the general public accords more reputation to the scholarship fund, and thus investors are likely to invest there because they see the scholarship fund as being reputable. Secondly, investors want to be seen as heroes. They often want to heroize themselves, be seen as very powerful. That means even if there's less absolute achievement, investors want to be able to be seen as coming in and saving the day, and that only happens when there's a great change in performance. Thirdly, and importantly, a lot of scholarships are already merit-based because private companies often have an incentive to already give you scholarships in order for their company to become more profitable, which means we tap into a far greater untapped market, which means people are more likely to view you view you in a better light because they see you as like one of the first to do it. You're more likely to be seen as a pioneer, etc., etc. In conclusion, there's more likely to be investment. Even if we lose all this, we think we get more people because in their world, some rich people get funded more than they need to, because Andrew tells you about the disalignment between merit and economic necessity. At the very least, we are seen to be helping more people. For all these reasons, we get more investment and opening up wins. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for those very fine remarks. Moving swiftly to the second half of the debate. Member of GOV to open that half, please. You're here.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, clear.
Okay, I'll start my speech in a moment. The opening half ended in a wash over who will get better students with better outcomes in the future. We are going to give you the first argument to explain how the incentive structure of those disadvantaged students changes depending on the different policies. So if you are a person from a disadvantaged community and you want to enter the university, and you are told that people will be from your community will be funded mostly based on the disadvantage, you look around yourself and you can see that your life is very poor. Like, you have very bad conditions, like there are a lot of disadvantages that you face, there are a lot of struggles that you have. So you understand that based on this metric, you are indeed deserving of this scholarship, and you think that you will likely get it based on your disadvantage. You think that you need to achieve some level of performance, some level of merit, which will allow you to stay in the university, but not too high, because you are indeed at a disadvantage, and this is true, of course. However, what you don't realize as an individual, because of your cognitive biases, is that there are a lot of other people who are disadvantaged too. Why don't you realize that? First, because of availability bias. It is very easy for you to recall the instances of disadvantage that you faced than to imagine other people's disadvantages. This is first thing. Second thing is that when you're talking about merit, it is very easy to compare your own merit to the merit of others. You can see your grades at school, you can participate in academic contests, you can see whether you can solve a mathematical problem or not, and that gives you an idea of how meritocious you are. However, you have no way of really understanding whether you are in the 10% of the most disadvantaged of your community that you are going to be admitted based on that. And that changes your incentive structure dramatically, because if you understand that you out of your disadvantaged community will be chosen on merit, you have the extreme incentive to focus on your merit tremendously. You have an incentive to be hardworking, to indeed succeed, to indeed excel and go beyond, as the opening opposition is telling us. However, we believe that undersigned opposition, you are actually not going to do that because, or many people are not going to do that, and many people who are admitted are not going to do that because of the lowering of the general standards, because they will feel that they deserve it by virtue of their disadvantage. Okay, and there are two consequences of that. First of all, we believe that the vast majority of people who feel that way will be disappointed, and will be justly disappointed, because there are a lot of people who are at the lowest, like the poorest. Yeah, there are a lot of them, many more even deserving individuals that can get admitted to Harvard or any degree. That means that the vast majority of them will be disappointed, while they were promised admission based on their disadvantage. This is the first outcome. The second outcome is that the applicants, the students that you do get, are not those students that you would like to be, and have not excelled to the extent that where they could have. They have not been as hardworking. They have not put as many hours into their studies, and that means that all the answers of opening opposition that beat opening government are not working here, because those people are not hardworking enough to succeed in the future. Even if they stay at the university, they are not going to excel. They are not going to become CEOs. They are not going to become presidents, and so on. So this is one thing. The second thing, in terms of choosing people, we believe that only merit actually allows you to get the most talented individuals, those who are basically geniuses, those who excel. Why? Because on the opposition side of the house, you only look for your applicants to have some basic level that would allow them to not drop out of the university, but don't look beyond that. And only if you choose on merit, even if some people are more privileged than others, only that allows you to get the geniuses, to get the best performers. And those are the people who are going to become Barack Obama. Those are the people who are going to become CEOs or scientists, who change the whole image of society. First of all, this means that the benefits that the opening government talks about accrue on our side, while they fail to the opening opposition. However, we also understand that even if people who are selected are a bit more privileged than those people who are not selected, we believe that still this is okay. Why? Because that privilege that would have tutors or something that allowed them to get to the university on merit will also mean that they are more likely to succeed in the future, because you don't become legislator, you don't change policies, even if you're extremely talented, without support from your family, without some extent of social connections, without some extent of financial security and stability in your family, even if those people are more privileged within their own POIO. Go.
Scholarship funds only allocate money to students who are already admitted by universities based on merit. You'll always want to go to a better school, which will still admit on merit, still incentivizing you to work harder.
This basically, well, I mean, everyone is trying to tag the mechanism in one way or the other, but for this motion to work, there needs to be a difference, and that means that people who are admitted on their opposition side will not be as meritocious as the people who are admitted on the government side. Otherwise, your own arguments don't work at all. So here, note the difference. We tell you how the incentive structure of the people changes prior to their admission, and after they are admitted they experience a shock where they even can drop out because you can't relearn those hardworking skills. If you have not been working so hard at school, it is hard to do that at university because you have little time to change that. So that means that for all those reasons, the people that we get are going to be much more successful and improve the society much better. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the member of Gulf for those very fine remarks. To open closing opposition's case, member of Gulf, please. Here.
Cool. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Give me like 1 second and then I'll start. Right, starting in 3, 2, 1, let's go. I'm going to do 3 things in the speech. 1, who applies to these grants. 2, why specifically like the merit is actually symmetric and why people will succeed on our side of the house, and in fact probably do better than they previously have. And 30, on long-term success and money of those grants. I think the most important thing in this debate and the way in which we're going to win is to show you that on our side of the house we get a more diverse pool of applicants. Note the panel that this is the most important thing into accessing all of the other benefits that have been discussed in this debate, i.e. it is the most important thing for massively enhancing your reputation as a grant. It is the most important thing for actually getting the most like availability of money and therefore funding you're able to like versus or like are able to like deduct in the long term is the most important thing in actually getting trust from those communities in order to encourage the students from those minorities to actually apply for your grant and feel like they're valued and feel like they're important members of the society and therefore deserve specifically these chances, which are also the thing that makes them like probably work harder and like succeed in specifically those roles. So firstly then, who applies to these grants and why is this incredibly important? 1, I think it's important to understand that if these scholarship grants aren't merit-based, I think more people probably just feel comfortable applying to them in the first place, right? Note that in the status quo, a lot of the time people feel like this is incredibly out of reach. It feels like it is not a place where they belong in the first place, which makes it quite daunting to go and say like, oh, I think I can do this at the point specifically at which society constantly puts you down and tells you that there are certain roles or certain things that you as someone from X community mustn't be doing because no one else from your community has done it before. Note that I think this probably means that like on our side of the house, we just get more people feeling more comfortable to apply in the first place. Note that this is specifically important at the point at which there are like the more disenfranchised groups, as in the people who have least access to those opportunities in the status quo, already never get the opportunity to be like the receiver of like outreach from those grants in the first place, right? Because note that at the point at which you have to focus on, right, the thing that you go to is specifically the school districts from, or like the minority school districts that have already to some extent performed better than the others, or have already produced 1 or 2 like university graduates, or have already like are at least within the rankings of the poor scholarship of the poor districts, somewhat at the bottom, at top of that, because you feel like you're more likely going to find the people that matters there. Thirdly, I think it means that you probably like also are reliant on teachers feeling like it is worth to pursue those things at the point at which all of those scholarship grants are merit-based. I think probably teachers never go into and tell their students like, oh, I think you can do this, you can work really hard, because they probably also don't feel like they can do this, or that it's just simply too much work in order to get it. Versus on the comparative, I think when you have it based on economic necessity, I think probably more teachers are actively going to search for those opportunities because they actually feel like it is something the students can do, and also makes it more personally rewarding to them. Note that also I think this matters at the point at which a lot of the time these communities do tend to be somewhat distrusting of like institutions, or specifically institutions that are representative of privilege, or simply don't know these opportunities exist, because note that probably at the point at which your school is massively underfunded, your teachers also don't have like the extra hour to research all of the scholarships funding, scholarship opportunities to show to their students in the first place. Note that I think at the point at which like, or simply like probably I think at the point at which probably you feel like it is more accessible, or it is simply more visible to you, and these scholarship grants also now have incentives to go into new communities where they haven't actually gotten students from before. I think that probably means that is the point at which you get the more diverse pool of applicants. That is also the point at which people start trusting those things more and probably start recommending it and actually feel like it is something that they can do. It is something that they can and apply to. It is something that is important. Note that this also means that you have the greater chance of getting the actually super capable and talented student that government care about in terms of their ability to actually perform well. We think we get the brightest people at the point at which you get them more diverse, at the point at which you search for them in larger places, but also I think we just get more diverse people from more different backgrounds rather than just the most privileged sliver of the people who are from that specific community or like minority group or community group that is classified as being someone that you need to reach out for. Note that if only merit-based, I think you never look in those places, you never get those people. Note that this is also prior to all of the kind of benefits that opening opposition want to claim, because at the point at which I'm unsure whether these people apply, or if I'm unsure which people apply, I never get those place. I never like get that in the first place. Next, then, why specifically those people are likely going to do well? I think it's important to note that I think it's not just because of like, oh, the fact that meritocracy is actually a hoax, and therefore, and like these students do better at the point at which they have more support, like opening opposition tells you. I think it's actually that you feel more supported because you now actively have someone telling you that they believe in you, and that the only narrative that you've existed or like that you've gotten from society overall is one of failure, or is one of telling you that you don't belong and that you aren't good enough to do those things. Note that I think it's easier for you because you now have specifically gotten that grant, you have that feeling of success, and therefore you feel more supported, and probably means you're better able to actually reach that level of performance. I don't think it's true that these people do badly, like closing government want to tell you. Secondly, I think you're probably more likely to actually want to keep going at the point at which things get tough, because note that you specifically also don't want to lose that scholarship. I think you know the comparative of literally having no money, of literally living in the most dire circumstances. I think when you now know the niceness of having that grant, of being able to access those nice facilities, being able to be in that course, then probably I think you want to hold on to that thing pretty well. I think you probably want to try your hardest to literally do that and to succeed and to defy all of those expectations. Thirdly, I think you specifically want to prove people wrong, right? I think at the point at which you've made it to this place and it's quite rewarding to you, I think you probably want to keep in that place and want to try as hard as possible to show it to all of those rich dickheads that say you couldn't do it. Thirdly, I think you probably have like companies specifically wanting to give you extra support, right? Because note that it makes them look really good at the point at which they say, oh, we give you this kind of support and we want to specifically make you succeed. I think that probably means that you have significantly more support on our side of the house and you would get on the comparative, because you already feel like, oh, like, right, these people are already somewhat capable anyway, or they don't need that additional support. We go above and beyond for those people. Take opening government.
Yes, thank you. It is non-comparative to claim that less people will apply, because if you're a more successful candidate, you will apply anyway because you believe in your chances. So our mechanism stands.
Yeah, no, I don't
have
think
scholars.
See, the flaw that you make is that you think people think that they're already good enough. Note that on the comparative, people never feel like they're good enough because it's significantly harder for them to rationalize in their own heads that they are at the level that they need to be, or simply also, like, as I've told you before, they simply don't know about those opportunities because it's not something that is advertised in their school, because their school isn't seen as something that is like has enough merit in order to be able to reach those levels in the first place, and never apply on your side. Lastly, then on money, I think this is important to note in terms of a couple of reasons. One, in terms of virtue signaling, understand that it's incredibly important for lots of different actors in order to be able to get that money in the long run, because it makes them look incredibly good. This applies to like alumni, rich people, companies. Even if this is for bad reasons, I think it is still money that you're able to distribute. Note specifically, this isn't just about like, oh, you're able to sensationalize it like opening government tells you, but it's specifically about the personal incentive that lots and lots of rich people have, i.e. their specific like ego. If you're, for example, like a couple different scenarios, if you're like a bad person or a rich person who only cares about like, right, their social standing, then probably it makes you feel incredibly good to give to a massively poor person who you feel is like the most in need ever, because that affirms your own social standing vis-a-vis them. Secondly, I think probably if you're a good person, you do actually like care about like you are virtuous and aren't a horrible rich person, then probably it is still more satisfying to you to help someone who you perceive as being significantly worse off, because that feels like it is you doing the most part and therefore makes you feel good about yourself specifically. I think those personal incentives are significantly more important to lots of rich people, because note that like the mechanism that OGA gives you is about their ability to give have a secure investment. Note that I think this is true, but I think it is probably less important to them than the personal incentives given how much money they have anyway. Thirdly, they is specifically something that makes them feel unique because other scholarship grants exist. You are the only unique scholarship grant that gives to that particular community. Fifthly, I think it probably means you're more able to actually have alumni that believe in you because they're more thankful to you at the point at which they had literally nothing versus at the point at which they had something or had other opportunities that existed prior to them. Note that on our side of the house, we get more people to apply, we get the most diverse group of people and therefore have the overall legitimacy for the grant in the long run. That is the most important thing to accessing any of the benefits that exist. Vote CO.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, member of opposition, for those very fine remarks. To conclude the case from government side of the House, specifically for CG, I'd like to invite GovWhip to speak. Here.
Okay, coming.
Wait for 1 second, please. Lots of paper, lots of paper. No. Okay, am I audible?
Yeah.
Great. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. All teams in these debates agree that we need inclusion to get better PR, to receive more money, because it's in the interest of these funds. So first of all, starting to CEO. Yes, they say a lot of people are out of reach. Well, fuck them. We don't need them. We don't need to understand why this inclusion is important. Whereas in our world, the best people will go to university, which have better chance to go to the better PR education because they have success. They have bigger possibility of success. Moreover, they say lots of people actually don't go. Less applications. We already have thousands more applicants than they can accept, including some people even from the most disadvantaged places. So we don't understand what the delta and how it changes or affects anything or how big the affection are. Moreover, they say, well, people feel supported from these disadvantaged communities. It's not comparison. Why? Because people in our world based on merits do not so rich, and there's still marginalized group, which is like low above the medium. And so we believe they still do feel supported because they still want this possibility. But now you believe in yourself better and have higher motivation. Why? Because you see that you have quite great results and they're bigger and bigger and better. And so possibly motivation system in our world, not only from supporting, but from your insides out too. So you possibly be better student. And so it's actually everything with CEO, but some rebuttal to opening a position will be applied to CEO too. Okay, several rebuttal to opening a position. They say, well, you have no motivation, just people from these marginalized communities like with bad economics have much pressure, and so they want to and they're performing better. And in the same speech, it is said that people with a merit-based system are under pressure, and so they perform worse. So we believe it's not comparison situation, but we believe that pressure exists in both worlds. Why? Because you as a person, as a merit person, have achieved this result, and you have to actually say, yeah, I actually achieved that. It's my duty to stay here because I want to people to believe that it's not a random situation. Yeah, I actually worked hard, and as I receive and rename this situation as I work hard, I want to save it, and it's my opportunity of my life because I do everything to participate, and so I have lots of motivation, lots of pressure, actually good for me, because I too want to stand in this university because I just I don't know, made everything to have this opportunity. So it's much more important for me than the fact that I already was in lesser group, and so I did something, but it's not that much. It's not that high concurrence, high competition to you. So possibly the motivation, yeah, they have motivation, but it's less motivation than in our world where you put much more effort because competition is just much harder. Now, talking about PR, they say, well, it's great PR because even if it's not a good job, you still think that it's a journey. We can make a great narrative. Several answers to that. First of all, we believe that for majority of people, unprivileged group is actually the unprivileged, everybody unprivileged. They do not believe that there are some ratings in unprivileges. And so if we talk about story, we see that as more unprivileged people with more money and people with less money who are still unprivileged, the same to us, because we as the majority believe that they're actually the same, not dependent on their economy level. Why? Because we haven't got knowledge, for example, for it. Yeah. And actually, when we see this story, or when we see this representative person, we believe that he's too unprivileged, and it's not matter for us. But moreover, we believe that narrative and stories actually depended on the end. When you have a typical lawyer from university, it's not cool because by the standards of majority and by standards of community, it's not a prestige job, it's a usual job for you. But when we say that we have Afro-American who actually goes to president or senate or something like this, we believe that there is high possibility that we see him as a successful person because he high above us and he has this style and reputation. And so we believe that this university is better. And moreover, we see this from the ratings, from example, from government, from other donation systems, that they see that they make minorities better and more effective. And so basically we will do it. Moreover, we understand that even if in case of opening our position based on motivation, you have a lot of motivation, but we believe that even if we have motivation, there is lack of resources which you can use. It's a lack of knowledge you can have before university, and lack of not time but mental resources, for example, knowledge resources, for example, or just skilling of studying and resources to go to become better, because you as a person from merit-based system already tried hard and already had some better situation to and so you have just higher base which you can go. So we understand that you will reach higher level even with less motivation than person with more motivation but without the resources, because resources is what you need. Opening a position, POI. Come on.
Recognize that this is an active debate for just one scholarship fund. Why does the actions of one probably obscure fund out of thousands lead to such large-scale societal change that CG and CO claim?
Great, because one representative from our university is great for our university because it's a great PR. So we don't understand what the problem in here. Now, starting from opening government, why we are better? They say the problem of resources, that you have no money just for you to become a better person. And the second case actually based on situation if this person actually successful. We understand that rebuttal of opening opposition works greatly, that say, well, fund could be big and we can give them money. It's not a problem, but our situation is much bigger problem. Why? Because it can be solved by money, it can be solved by different auto resources. Why? Just because we believe that for this situation they have lack of motivation to work with it, and so even if they stay, there is just motivation is much more important than resources, because it's based in this situation, because it's based on how much resources do you want and do you try to acquire. And so we believe that in this world it's just much intense pain for you. Why? Because for several reasons, we believe that in this world, when you have less motivation, it's harder for you to stay in, and it's no need for you to achieve something bigger because you're already okay to be a lawyer, so not effective PR. By all these reasons, proud to propose.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Govwit, for those very fine remarks. Finally, to close the CO's case as well as opposition's case, as well as the debate as a whole, output, please. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yep. Clear.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was in chat or on camera. I'll try to take opening. Starting in 3, 2, 1. 3 clashes. Firstly, on who are the people applying. Secondly, on the funding you get for the scholarship fund, as that's probably one of the most important incentives for you to keep going. Thirdly, on the merit of those students, starting with people applying. I think that the thing that Vicky tells you is prior to everyone else's analysis here, as that is contingent on you as a scholarship fund actually ever looking good, i.e. you have people who want to go there and who want to apply and who want to use you. That's the most important thing for optics. What she tells you is that now more people feel like they can apply. There is done more outreach is done to that. Notice that one, opening opposition is contingent on people applying in order to get their benefits of like having good optics or helping minorities. But secondly, when they say, oh, we have a more diverse pool, they never actually explain why that is something that happens. Thus, the analysis that Vicky tells you is relevant, especially with the extension that CJ provides to you. That is kind of counter to the stuff the opening opposition just a search. I think that our analysis is prior to anything else that OO wants to claim as a benefit. Opening government wants to say that like, same number of people apply because people want to achieve that type of like scholarship and they're meritful. Even if all the people who are good actually believe that they are like good or have enough merit in order to succeed, I think it's just not a numbers game. There are less people who are top of the class or who are the ones that are succeeding in state level Olympiads who would qualify for these types of grants, rather than there are people who are failing their classes or who are, I don't know, just the poorest of their communities. Whatever that comparative is, I think we have more people. CJ tries to respond like, diversity doesn't matter. Genuinely unclear why. I think that it does matter significantly for things like optics and money, i.e., for example, the representatives of those most intersectional or most diverse or most disprivileged groups are also ones that are going to fund you in the future for the most, who already have achieved some riches, or generally companies who care about their PR. Oftentimes notice that both like scholarship funds or anything that happens in the society who are like trying to fund things or are trying trying to do, like, I don't know, social welfare, are oftentimes blamed for virtue signaling, i.e. only supporting the most privileged, or only, for example, if you're supporting people of color, you're choosing ones that pass most as white. I think there's lots of blaming within the society for that type of virtue signaling. In that sense, choosing the most privileged ones is actually really bad for your optics, and no one is going to want to fund you because you're going to get backlash. Next thing CG says is that, but we just don't generally need more people. I think that one, there is always money left over in scholarship funds because just not enough people apply. I think that's a problem that we are solving. But secondly, I think more applicants generally justifies need for more investments, i.e. all of the claims we make under why you get more funding actually get more intense at a point at which you have a large pool of people to show that really, really desperately need that. That is why Vicky's extension matters. CG tries to counter this analysis by going like, you can't measure a disadvantage, so you don't apply, versus you can measure merit. I think that one, measuring merit is generally just only accessible to the best of the best groups who do have that type of merit to show. But if you're not succeeding in your class, you're not even going to look for how can I measure myself against merit. But secondly, the society generally discriminates you. It makes you feel like shit and stupid, and that makes you already feel that you don't deserve that type of merit. Even if you would have that, under closing government side, you never get any applicants. I think at that point, Vicky has already proven to you the most important premise of this debate. That's the reason why we win. Second clash on the money that we get. Opening opposition has several claims on this. First, they tell you that like, you have a more relatable struggle, and that is the reason why you're going to get funding. I think that rich people are probably oftentimes very selfish, and they are unable to empathize with the poverty and the disadvantages that you have faced. Thus, the analysis that Vicky tells you about their selfish incentives of either looking good and themselves just feeling good that they help the poorest person ever, I think are significantly more important reasons, and that's why Vicky's analysis is more important. The second reason is like, it is a justifiable investment if there is a large margin of change and looks something that is nice. Notice that those rich people have enough money that they do not care how good that like investment is in and of itself in terms of whether it's justifiable or not. I think that the thing they just generally care about more is like what makes them look better and how they feel the best. At a point at which we show you we have the most diverse pool of candidates, those rich people also look the best. I think at that point our mechanization on why it's very just likely that we get more funding is more important than the stuff OO tells you. We tell you that one, you look unique, the fund looks unique because there are other merit-based scholarship funds that exist that have nothing to do with minorities. So when someone is looking which scholarship fund to fund, they choose yours. Secondly, this is just like the claim about why all of those rich people want to do the funding that Vicky tells about, like whether it's virtue signaling or personal feelings. Lastly, I think members from the same intersectional groups are going to want to fund you once they have gotten rich. All of the stuff that Vicky tells you. What is the responses, or like what's the government claims against this? OG tells you that one extraordinary student gets more money than like 10 average students. I think that one, that is contingent on proving that we don't have any extraordinary students. At a point at which opening government fails to deal with that, and Vicky has extensive analysis as to why it's likely that we have merit and like we have good students on our side as well, that comparison the opening government offers you actually just doesn't stand. But secondly, even if we don't have extraordinary students on our side, but just a very disadvantaged group going to a very average, like I don't know, or like middle income level, is something that is also a very well presentable success story. So I think we can still claim that comparative on our side. The second thing OG says is like, you get married, you become rich, and you get, or you name a company, or you name that to your company, and that's money to you. I think that if their only mechanism for getting money is relying on your very individual students getting to a good graduate job and then getting money, I think that that is uncomparative to the amount of money we are able to get from like rich people or companies wanting to do PR that Vicky tells you about. So just generally on that comparative, the amount of money we get is significantly higher. Before I talk about my last point, opening government.
Yes, thank you. Look, if you want the scholarship on the basis of merit, that means you have by far greater chances and skills and opportunities and motivation to further succeed because you won the competition among these people. Alternatively, you do not succeed to the same extent.
I think all of our analysis about like why people want to fund this is not contingent on any type of merit that you get, but rather just helping the poorest. I think irrespective of who wins the merit clash, we have won on all of the other metrics that are more important and more close. I don't think either GovBench has actually proven to you why merit matters in terms of getting anything that the fund cares about. Given that this is an actor motion, that clash is actually meaningless, but we are winning that anyways. Opening opposition tells you that like, you have potential to succeed, but because you were previously held back, but now you could do better in a university setting. I think that's a nice claim, but they never give you the mechanization on why it is likely that you are going to succeed. And that's the link that Vicky crucially fills in. She tells you how you feel supported, or how you have all of those companies that want you to succeed and possibly hire later on, giving you all that type of support. CG tries to tell you that, you're never going to succeed if you don't have family support. We need all of the Obamas. One, they never explain to you why you're going to have an Obama on their side of the house. They just actually never do the analysis on why that is the realistic comparative that they're going to get a president. Secondly, I think they don't don't do the analysis as to why it's unlikely to get that on our side. The only thing they say is like, oh, you need family support, unclear, at the point at which there are lots of success stories from those minorities who have succeeded without family support. And I think they could still have that like mental support from their families. That's just uncomparative. Opening government tries to tell that like, married people are still like merit is something that you can still have merit and still succeed or like still be disadvantaged, and that's the people we want to engage with. I think that's uncomparative at a point at which the comparative in this debate literally is like, are we helping the poorest or are we helping the ones that are like most smart? I think that all of the stuff we tell you about why it's actually likely that you're going to succeed counters all the stuff that goes tell you about merit. At that point, we win on all three clashes. CO.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Opposition Whip, for those very fine remarks. Thank you very much, everybody. Truly a wonderful debate on this topic. Please leave the breakout room right now. Allow us around 15 minutes amount of time to wrap a decision, after which we'll call you back. Cheers.
Thanks for the debate, everyone.
Thank you.
Or Calm, if you don't mind turning off the recording.